So let's talk about what we're going to go through today. I want to take a look back through the history of cyber attacks, how they've changed over the years, and where we are today, what's going on in the world today. We're also going to look at some of the specific types of fraud, some of the names of fraud, and we're also going to talk about some of the world's largest data breaches, some real scary stuff. And then I might put you to sleep a little bit with some statistics from the AFP, the Association of Financial Professionals, Fraud and Control Surveys 2014-2015 statistics. The ultimate goal today for all of this, for all of you, from a personal perspective and a business perspective, is awareness and education, because that's your best defense. Before I go to that slide, I have a question. Can anybody guess when the first cyber attack took place? What decade? I know you've had coffee. Come on, somebody help me out. Help me out. 80s, 60s, 90s. Keep going. 1903. 1903. So there was a gentleman such as myself giving a presentation to an audience through a podium, and there was a magician in the audience, and the presentation was about telegraphy, so telegraphic messages and wireless and how secure it was. The magician was able to send Morse code messages that were very insulting through the projector to the audience. So not so secure. So my next story is 1932. There were 3 Polish cryptologists that were able to replicate the Enigma machine. Does anybody know what the Enigma machine is? Tell me.
I decoded all the Russian codes during World War II.
Very, very good. That's right. That's right. So that was a pivotal point for World War II. But even though it was 1932, they replicated the machine. A little bit later, there was a movie called The Imitation Game. Has anybody seen that movie? Alan Turing. So that was a group of mathematicians. They were able to crack the code. So not only were we able to intercept the messages, we were able to read them, predict when the attacks were going to happen, and it helped us to win the war. So we also have a situation in 1943 where a gentleman created the card punch machine, and what the Nazis were looking at the card punches for identifying the Jews. So what he did is he hacked into his own machine, eliminated column number 11 that had religion on it, and saved countless numbers of Jewish folks going to the death camps. So that's pretty exciting. So let's look at the 80s, because that was probably the most common answer as far as when the hacking started, right? So 1980s, great music, by the way, in that decade. We've got some hacking starting to happen. So does anybody remember the worm? Virus, the worm? Trojan horse? Okay, so that's where we started to see some interesting things. And then with the worm coming in, that's where it started to get really expensive, $100 million worth of damages, okay? And then we have a situation here, Solar Sunrise, where you had 3 teenagers who were able to hack into the Pentagon and NASA. So a lot of this stems from curiosity and just playing around with technology. But then over the years, it got pretty expensive. So we have also the Bitcoin hack. Anybody heard of Bitcoin? Okay. So a gentleman hacked the Bitcoin exchange and was able to give himself roughly $460 million worth of Bitcoin. Okay, pretty scary stuff. So that's over 100 years, and there's a lot more going on. So let's look at just 11 years. 2004, you'll see a lot of attacks in here, and a big one that I'll talk about in a little bit is TJMaxx. Anybody remember the TJMaxx hack? Credit card data? Ladies, anybody get hacked? I did. Also, Target got hit with that one too. Thank you very much. So 2004 to 2015, I just want to point out all the white space on the board right here. Not as much going on, but only 11 years later, bam. And this isn't just banking. There's a lot of stuff going on. So let's talk about some of the biggest breaches. We had Anthem, which is an insurance company, Blue Cross Blue Shield. So that database was hacked, and somebody was able to get in stealing credentials. And so that's a big deal. So viruses get into the computer. The criminals are able to get in and steal somebody's passwords, IDs and passwords. We're all sick of changing our IDs and passwords, right? It's very important. So when they hacked into there, they were able to steal ID information, which enables the criminals to do what? Steal your ID, right? Among other things, in the medical world, they're selling data on the black market, and they're able to get the back end of it, getting prescription drugs, selling those on the back market. So there's a lot of money to be made in the hacking of the selling the data and also compromising your information, your personal information. And the numbers are huge. So we also have eBay. We're a similar situation. The hackers are getting into the system, and again, they stole credentials, but this was from a small number of individuals at the company, and hundreds of millions of records stolen through that hack. Target, the one that we all remember, I still remember that email. So what happened there is the criminals hacked in, and they put a computer program into the machines. So it's kind of like they were skimming the computer information and off all the machines. So you swipe your card, boom, got that one. Swipe another card, boom, got that one. I want to say it was 70 million cards. So big numbers. This is where we're at today. Okay, so cybercrime has become its own industry, costing our businesses $500 billion a year, and it's predicted by 2019 that it's going to go to $2 trillion. That's big bucks, really, really big bucks. And also from the survey that I mentioned earlier, 1/3 of companies have been subjected to a cyber attack in the last 18 months. Any companies in here, has your company been attacked? Business email compromise, check fraud, ACH fraud, credit card fraud, right? Okay. Personally, credit cards? Anyone? I have 2 hands up. Okay, so it's a big deal, very big deal. So let's talk about this slide. So it's not just banks. And I've got another story to tell you in just a minute, but we talked about Anthem already. United Airlines is very interesting. I did like this story, but I didn't like the story at the same time. So there's a gentleman on the airplane, young, cocky, just goofing around with technology, was able to plug into the in-flight entertainment system on the airplane. So plugged his laptop into the box under his seat, and he was able to access the controls of the plane to where he could have turned the plane, could have done all kinds of interesting things with that plane, right? Scary, okay? TJMaxx, young gentleman by the name of Albert Gonzalez in Miami. At the age of 14, Albert Gonzalez was able to hack into NASA, smart young man. And actually with this little device, Albert Gonzalez was able to get into the TJMaxx system. He didn't know exactly what to do with the data and all the credit card information that he found, but he was war driving. So war driving, he's just driving around in the car and picking up on wireless networks that were not protected. And so through this $300 device, he gets all this great information. He can sell the information. He can do a lot of things with it. But what he did is he grabbed a bunch of his criminal buddies. They formed, I think, all together the Black Hat Society. And they were just super smart, and they stole tons and tons and tons. You know the story, Detective Will, now, right? So essentially, they caught him, and they said, okay, well, you can either go to jail or you can help us. You can help us, the FBI. So he chose to work for the FBI and continue to steal and stole an awful lot of money. He became very rich and drove fancy cars, and he didn't have to work very hard. But ultimately, he did do time in prison, and he said, I guess they were serious. So it was a very uncomfortable prison sentence. We've already talked about Target, right? Does anybody have teenagers? Young kids? PlayStation, right? Yeah? PlayStation? Okay, so Sony is a huge company, right? Sony was hacked, I believe it was 2011, so through the PlayStation network, again, tens of millions of credit card information that were stolen. So they hacked into this system through the server and got into the network, stole the data, right? So they always say lightning can't strike in the same place. I think Sony was hacked 3 times. 3 times. But one of the bigger ones, and not as much from a financial perspective, does anybody remember the movie The Interview with Seth Rogen about North Korea? Caused a lot of discomfort out there in the world and in the press because they were supposedly hired to assassinate the North Korea guy. And so they supposedly were warned, don't put this movie out there. We don't want this movie out into the world. And they hacked in, and they were able to wipe out 75% of their servers, corrupt their files. They actually crippled Sony as a corporation. Sony had to go back to paper and pen and phone. They had no systems. From a reputation perspective, they were crushed. Also, what they did is they stole 5 movies, one of which was Annie, and it had not even been released yet. So these systems are vulnerable, and the hackers are getting in a number of different ways. So financial risk, reputation risk, time, money, scary stuff. Companies are being compromised, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal for our country. Our country has formed a cyber crime unit. Cities have formed economic crimes units, et cetera. 71% of companies have increased their spending as far as what they're doing to prevent attacks. And we all feel that in terms of the system changes and how your passwords work, right? No longer can you use your dog's name, spell it backwards. It's getting serious, and there's a good reason for that. I want to tell a quick story about another situation that's not necessarily banking related or money related, but there was a gentleman by the name of Ratcliffe, and to prove a point, he was at a seminar called DEF CON in Las Vegas. And so he came forward with this device, which, does anybody know juvenile diabetes? What's this? It's an insulin pump, that's right. And this is a device. So just to prove a point, this gentleman at the DEF CON conference went through how he hacked into this device and was able to control the pump. Okay? Pumps, pacemakers, those kinds of things. It's pretty crazy, right? So we already talked about 1/3 of companies were attacked in the last 18 months. The number on this page that scares me the most is 60% of companies did not have a plan. Once you are attacked, what do, right? You might call Detective Will now. You might hire a company to come in and clean out your systems. It's costly. You have downtime. It's very expensive. So companies are spending an awful lot of money in fraud prevention. And this is a time, is anybody under budget cost controls? Any companies out there? Come on. BB&T people, raise your hands. That's one area that companies are spending money. They have to. It's just necessary. Does anybody use the text alerts or email alerts when you spend money on your credit card?
Yes.
Okay, good. ATM machine. As soon as I pull money out of the ATM machine, ding, I like it. So these kinds of things, I hate to say it, they're necessary because the criminals aren't going to stop. Okay, so let's talk about some of the ways that some of the viruses, some of the attacks, the way that it goes down. Phishing. If you think about fishing, you're at the lake, fishing. So the criminals are out there fishing for information, and it's not that hard to get. So who in the room is on Facebook? Oh boy. Who is on LinkedIn? Oh boy. We got information out there. How many of your companies have a website? Are there names of individuals on your website? Who works where, right? Okay. Also phishing. The criminals can call into a company and say, may I speak to somebody in your accounts payable department, right? Bam, they've got a name. Typically, they'll get a voicemail because the folks in accounts payable do not have time to answer the phones. They're busy making payments. And so it's very easy for them to get information, and they're very, very targeted to what they're doing. So as they gather information, that helps them create their cyber attack. We've already talked about malware. Malware, the word mal is bad, right? There's software, hardware, malware, bad. So that's what they're using to get into the systems. There's man in the browser. So there's a virus in the browser. As you're surfing around, picking up data, you pick up some malware, sits on the browser. And there's also a man in the middle, which is basically a form of eavesdropping. So they're basically listening, watching everything that's going on. And masquerading, we're going to get into that in a little bit. But quick question for the audience. So has anybody received an email from your boss saying, I need for you to send out a wire, or I need for you to make a payment? Didn't really come from your boss, did it? Right? Anybody else? We get them all the time in banking. So, and there's also communication from your vendors. Hey, I'm your vendor. Can you change my account number and routing number so that when you send me an ACH payment or a wire transfer, it now needs to go here? That may not have come from your vendor. And so, public records, right? What scares you about public records? They're public. So I've done some digging, and I've Googled myself and realized I have way too much information out there because I have an unusual name, unfortunately. My boss is a little luckier, named Chris Scott. I couldn't find anything on him, unfortunately, that I know of. And so all the information that's out there, I was able to find my signature on some documents. I was able to find all kinds of information about myself. Scared me to death. Luckily, I don't have any money to steal, so that's good. All right, let's take a look at the exciting statistics now. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but essentially 39% of the companies that were surveyed that were hit with fraud said that the loss was greater than $250,000. Now, that can be all in and how much you have to spend to do damage control and stop your business for an entire day or several days, and also how much money is being stolen. But you see an increase here, 2014 to 2015. Can anybody give me some just general guesses as to what's causing the increase in the cyber fraud here recently? Yes. Okay.
The mobile devices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. More?
Using unsecured Wi-Fi.
Yes. Good one. How are your companies changing the way they're making payments these days?
Electronic.
Right. So, trying to get away from paper, right? That's our goal. It's more efficient, but that opens up a whole nother can of worms for the criminals. So that's where they're looking and that's where they're focusing. But you still have to be careful with the paper, right? What's on the bottom of a check? Bingo.
Signature.
Right. Does anybody in the room use pop money? Anybody heard of pop money? Okay. Yep. So I've had several companies call me and say, "Hey, I got a penny from pop money. What is this?" I said, "You got more coming." So pop money is a way. So you know what I'm talking about. So pop money is the way that young people typically, and if you maybe see young people at the office, they said, okay, just pay me through pop money. Okay, so I didn't really want to go there, but I did, and it's pretty interesting. There you go. Perfect. Yeah. Nephews, coworkers that are young. So pop money essentially allows you as an individual to go in and register your account number and routing number. And then your grandchildren go in and they register on pop money, account number and routing number, and you can pay them through an email, okay?
Or mobile device.
Mobile device, that's right.
All you need is their mobile number.
Right.
And they can
Right. So they don't see your data, you don't see their data, but you're able to make these payments.
That's PayPal, right?
No. Similar, right. And the numbers are staggering. I don't know how many companies out there are playing in that space, but the P2P space is growing as far as financial transactions. It's easy, right? And it's pretty cool. We just hope Pop Money's secure, right? Okay. Just a quick example. So coming back to talking about payment methods, if you look at the dollars where the fraud is taking place, it's still checks. It's still checks. And what did I say before about what's on the bottom of a check?
Routing and account number.
Okay. If I happen to get a hold of your account number and routing number from your company, I can go out to Walmart.com and order checks in about 2 minutes that have my name and address, your account number and routing number on there. 2 minutes. Happens all the time. I'm sure you've got some stories about that. Yeah. So and so 23% of the dollars are coming from wire transfers. And those are those emails, that business email compromise that's going around. It's happening all day long. And you think, okay, I've heard all this. I know all this. I have some very, very intelligent clients, very large companies. The social engineering side of it is that good and that convincing where folks are doing it. Too long ago, 3 very intelligent people cross-checked each other, and they cross-checked the details. They had a new boss. His car was in the parking lot. His door was shut. They heard noise in his office, which happened to be a radio. He said, I'm busy. I'm behind closed doors. He's new. I need for this wire to go out now. It's for a consultant. $18,000 out the door because nobody wanted to disturb the new boss. Nobody wanted to get in trouble. And they've heard my speech. And as far as BB&T, we put bulletins out there on our online banking platform, personal and business, watch out for this stuff. And they did it. It was fear factor. It was already knowing the information. It was knowing from a press release they had a new CEO. Big stuff. So wire transfers, big money. Also the commercial credit and debit cards. Okay, debit cards. Who uses debit cards? Ooh. How many of your companies are using debit cards? Ooh. Okay. Debit cards. That money comes out of the account, boom, right away, right? Okay, credit card, you've got a whole lot more protection. Just side note, way better to use a credit card than a debit card. Just throwing that out there. But both of them are being compromised. And then the growing space, as we talked about with Pop Money and all these other payment trends that are happening, growing space in the ACH transactions. Okay, that's taking place all over. Pop Money and how many hundreds of other companies out there using it. I use it. I like Pop Money. I use it, but it's a little scary to me, honestly. So these are the sources of the fraud. How much is coming from an outside individual? We talked about those outside individuals coming into a system, whether it's a 14-year-old or a company overseas that's hacking in. They're getting it. They're getting in there, folks. Systems are vulnerable. People are vulnerable. They're getting in there. So 50% of the attempts were the business email compromise, right? We hope to see that number go down with awareness, education, organized crime rings, third-party outsourcers. So one of the big retailers that was hit, their information was compromised by their heating and air company. Somebody got into the heating and air company and accessed the credentials of the retailer through the heating and air company. So do you trust your vendors? No. Account takeover, and only 5% internal party, and I believe Detective Will now is going to tell us inside fraud story or two. Mobile devices, 2% but growing, and then lost or stolen laptop, right? Does that happen to anybody in here? So we talked about the different types of payments, and 71% of companies were actually had the check fraud attempts, because I talked before, cheap, easy, happens all the time. After the checks, the wire transfers were the most popular as far as companies being attacked, and the big number right here, 21% of the organizations reported they'd been hit 21 times in 1 year. It's not going away. More statistics. So 88% of the companies were using positive pay. Who is any companies in the room using positive pay? Yeah. BB&T, raise your hand. We better be using positive pay. So positive pay, check fraud protection. I'm not endorsing products, but I'm telling you it's helpful. If you're writing checks, think about positive pay.
Can you explain what positive pay is? There's so many people that don't have it.
Great question. So positive pay is where your company is writing checks, and your company is also sending that check information, payee name, dollar amount, check number, to the bank. So the bank holds on to that information as the checks come into clear. It's bumping up against those records. If one doesn't match, you're going to get an email that says, uh-oh, this one doesn't look right, and then you're able to return that check. It's a real good idea. Okay? Question?
Is there any restrictions based on volume? Like, do you have to have a certain volume of checks going
No,
out the
ma'am.
door in order to do something like that?
That's a great question. It's a great question. It's really the best way I describe positive pay. It's an excellent insurance policy. Unless you can completely get away from writing checks altogether, which Europe, they're all over that. I know some of my European clients come over here. I don't want to write these checks. This is crazy. But I don't think they're going away in the United States real soon. We've been saying that for years, but yes, that's great questions. Anybody else? Questions about positive pay? Okay. On the same note, there is something called ACH positive pay. So if you see one of those pop money transactions come through for a penny, what's coming after that is a big debit. So the scary part about ACH fraud is you as a company have 24 hours to do something about that transaction. If you're an individual, you have, I believe, 60 days to dispute it, okay? So it sounds not fair, but so in the case of ACH protection for your companies, there is ACH positive pay. Very easy to use. So essentially, you set up ACH positive pay and say, I don't want anybody debiting my account except for maybe my insurance company, my bank. You know, a few companies are allowed to get in, and you're able to block everybody but these particular companies. 6 months down the road, you add a new trading partner, they're going to debit you. You can add them at that time. That transaction will come in, you'll get an email, and then you can authorize the transaction. Okay? Any questions?
Is this something new to BB&T, or is it something new to the banking industry?
It's not super new,
Okay.
so neither, but it is super important. So it's
How do you get to be part of this?
for the ACH positive pay.
Or any of them?
You just call your treasury professional. Call Dawn. Yeah. Typically somewhere between maybe $25 and $35 a month. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not quoting. Don't hold me to that. But that's a great insurance policy. Great insurance policy. I wish they had it for personal accounts because I would definitely take it. Any other questions? Any other stories? I know we have more stories coming. Okay, so the impact of stolen information, I think I've kind of beat that to death. We talked about Sony. We talked about they had multiple breaches, 77 million customers, dollar impact, $170 million. Movies, reputation risk. It was bad, right? It was really bad. So why would a data breach impact you? Okay, so a data breach impacts you in terms of you. If your system's compromised, you're now at reputation risk, dollar risk, all of those things. And you want to make sure that your employees are using good password protection. So this is an overview of a cyber attack, and we've talked about it before. So that you've got the hacker, and by way of phishing for information, social engineering, he's going to get in. Malware gets on the system. The victim can go into online banking. This story actually did take place. So individual, very intelligent individual, goes into online banking, logs in, plugs in a token. So there's a password, ID, password, token, plugs it all in, and then sees this little circle turning, like it's just waiting and waiting and waiting. I know this person's impatient. Close the browser, start all over again. Did not know that he was on a fake website, a spoofed website. So while he thinks he's logging into online banking, he's actually on a fake website delivering all those codes to the criminal. The criminal is sitting over here logging into the real website, was able to send a wire out, a big wire. So the message here is it's all connected, right? So we talked about social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. We talked about email, so Google, Yahoo. We talked about browsers, how you can pick up viruses through browsers. We talked about so all your connections. Criminals are getting in, they're getting access to data, or they're destroying data. So in some of these attacks, they're going in there and they're corrupting files, they're locking down databases, and I think we're going to hear a story about that later. And then we're going to talk about masquerading. And I wanted to show this example. So this is an email that comes from Kelly King, who is our big cheese, top of the house. If I got an email from Kelly King, I'd be real nervous and I'd want to pay attention to it. I'd want to do something about it. But if you look at the top, Kelly King is spelled with an I. Kelly, K-E-L-L-I. At the bottom, it's K-E-L-L-Y. Sometimes it's that tiny of a detail that'll help you. Next one. So what we have here is this is a true example in the title, Get Back With Me Now. Again, sense of urgency, et cetera, et cetera. Business email compromise. And again, the phishing scams are harmful. We've already probably beat that one to death, so we know what's going on there. And the other thing to realize is that this stuff can be sitting on your computer right now. So very, very important for your IT folks to have the antivirus, the protection software running all the time. And then another thought is I have a lot of clients that don't turn their computers off at night. Is that anybody? Not a good idea, right? And they putting her hand up. So what happens when you shut your computer down and reboot, it may be updating critical software that's going to protect you, okay? So here are some more tips. So check the email address, as we talked about. Also, the attachments. We've all been told don't open attachments unless you know where it's coming from. Some of those might be worth a phone call. Even if you think you know where it's coming from and you think you know what it is, might be worth a phone call. And also, this one's specific to BB&T, Dear Valued Employee. We're called associates. So just stay vigilant. Be on the lookout. Also, we know this one to be true. If there are emails coming across, if there's a lot of spelling errors, grammatical errors, that kind of thing. And also, as we talked about, the exaggerated sense of urgency. Not clicking on links, hovering over, making sure you know where you're going, etc. So some more cautions. I'm sure some of you have seen the email, your account's been locked, blah, blah, blah. It's usually from the wrong bank for me, so I mean, that's a dead giveaway, but they happen all the time. And I think about somebody like my dad and my mom that would totally freak out over that. They would pick up the phone immediately and call this number. Who do you think this number is going to? Exactly. So you see something like this, you want to go and look up the number of your bank and call that number, not this number. And also, as we talked about, these attackers are so good. They're character, charisma. They're able to get in because they're good at what they do. So the losing battles are the system vulnerabilities are not going to go away. The criminals are going to stay one step ahead. They can get in. They can steal credentials. They can put malware on the computer in so many different ways. And I'm sure we'll hear some more stories in a little bit. Humans. We all make mistakes, right? We have to make all these judgment calls. All that data in one short email, you're having to really interrogate everything. And the malware, if you think about it, there are over 100 million instances of malware in today's world. In 20 years, it went from 500 to over 100 million. And so think about a flu virus, right? You get a flu shot, a flu shot. So by next year, that flu shot's not really relevant. The flu mutates, changes, so do the viruses. No way to prevent them all the time. So some suggestions as far as protecting your company, protecting yourselves. If you're going to do financial transactions, it's a good idea to get a separate computer for financial transactions. $200, $250. Keep it locked and loaded. Have your IT folks block it from all other internet sites. Silo. And also have dual control on all your payments using the antivirus, anti-spyware, and having those update continuously, rebooting your computer. So, and no online activity. So our company doesn't let us play on Facebook during the day. And cutting those things off and not letting folks get to their personal email through the business computer is a good idea. Using spam filters, pop-up blockers. Some of this stuff is just is general information, but leaving the computers unattended or unlocked. Walking away from the computer. We get in big trouble if we walk away from the computer and don't lock it down. Furthermore, if I leave my office, unless my laptop is hooked to a cable, I've got to take it with me or lock it in a drawer. Kind of a pain, but good idea. Also, firewalls, and don't use public Wi-Fi. Just don't do it. Okay? So furthermore, for online banking systems, if you're using online banking systems for your company or for yourself, be careful, be vigilant, keep looking at web addresses, keep looking at email addresses. The other recommendation is if you see a sign that you've got some malware, shut your computer down, contact your bank, disable your online banking, and follow all those steps. You don't want anyone getting in. It's kind of like when your credit card is compromised, what's the first thing you do? Call and cancel it, right? My daughter just went through this with her debit card. So just being extra careful. And also we talked about this before, clicking on any links, make sure it's legitimate. Also with the attachments, keep your systems current as far as looking for the viruses in there. Again, be cautious and skeptical. Trust no one with emails, even phone calls, from your vendors. Please change my information. And dual approval. This is kind of a new one. Dual approval on creating vendors. And so therefore, if you have dual approval for creating vendors in your accounts payable system, that's going to prevent one person having the control of vendors. So we've seen a lot of fictitious vendors and then payments going to employees' pocket, not good. So ultimately, you are the final layer of the defense. You and sharing this message with everybody. Share it with your family, share it with your coworkers, share it with your boss. Getting the word out there, that's the best way to prevent this sort of thing, or at least try to keep it under control. And the other thing, just wanted to mention quickly, so everybody's aware, credit cards have the chips on them. Did that solve all our problems? No. So, yeah, absolutely. So when you go shopping online, Amazon, anyone else, all the time, so you don't. The chip has nothing to do with that. So the online and the cyber attacks will continue to happen, and it's still vulnerable. My stepmom had a PayPal account over 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, and she didn't think a thing of it and kind of moved on. It was her account number and routing number, because back then that's the way you did PayPal. About 5 years ago, somebody hacked her account, and that's where they got the information when PayPal was hacked. Okay, they got her account number, routing number, and $3,000. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not pretty. So anywhere you have information stored, think about how safe it is. And I hate to even throw this one out here, but everybody gets paid by direct deposit.
Yes.
What's required for direct deposit? Yeah. Where is it? It's on your company's computer system, right? We hope that's safe. We hope that's secure. Are you thinking about it a little bit more now? Yeah? Okay. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time. Thank you.
As mentioned earlier, things that we talk about today are going to scare you a little bit. It's intended, because if you're not aware, if you're not paranoid, what's the point? Paranoia is awareness. Absolute paranoia is absolute awareness. All right? If you are paranoid, if you are aware of your situation, of what's around you, you're less likely to become a victim of fraud. Now, I can and have spoken for hours on identity theft and current fraud trends, but today's gathering is more business orientated. So you may pick up some things that will help you on a personal level for your prevent identity theft and fraud, but I'm going to speak more towards business. So I don't know that all the types of businesses represented, but we'll talk about external threats and then internal threats, and hopefully this will cover everyone in their type of business that they have. First of all, the internet. All right, the internet, we know the internet's there, we can communicate on the internet, but are we secure? Who set up your internet? Was it a professional? Do you have a firewall? Do you know what I'm referring to with a firewall? Do you know what an IP address means, what it is? IP address is a doorway. That doorway goes to your business or to your home if you have internet. And if you don't have it properly secured, then every time a criminal or anyone else comes a-knocking, it's saying, hey, here I am, come on in. Well, you wouldn't do that at home if somebody knocked on the door and a stranger was there and you said, come on in. So you don't want to invite the criminals that are out there. You heard the term earlier, war dialing. Back in the day, it was telephone auto dialing for businesses to get on their PBX system to make international calls for free. And now it's looking for wireless signals or over the internet, checking IP addresses in sequential order until they find a computer that identifies what kind of software, and then they can exploit certain hacking software towards that particular IP address, that doorway, to get access. Or perhaps give you some type of ploy, a link, an email, or something that you click on to allow them to have access to your computer that you may not realize has been compromised. And it can be used in many different ways. Denial of service attacks it can be used to attack businesses, but our own government, our own infrastructure, your computer, can be utilized whenever the person who controls your computer, you don't even realize is controlled, whenever they want to. And you and tens of thousands or millions of other computers also compromised to direct their activities towards a particular business or entity or infrastructure, and cause those systems targeted to fail. So you should have firewall. You should have an antivirus program. What's an antivirus program? Antivirus is kind of like, I equate it to a Secret Service agent. I'm a Secret Service agent, I'm looking for you, sir. And I have your picture here, and I'm looking, and I'm comparing it against the crowd, and I'm looking. Except you dyed your hair, put on a wig, dyed your hair, changed your appearance. Well, antivirus looks at their definitions. That pictures the definition of the threat. You walk right by me because I don't recognize you because you've changed your appearance. That's antivirus. Pretty much stupid. It only knows what it's already been told to look for. And they're constantly evolving, viruses. So antivirus is better than nothing, but don't hang your hat on that as the end all, okay? Malware, anti-Trojan. Trojans are basically, Trojan horse. We all know the story, right? So you think it's one thing, it maybe is, but it also has something else nefarious as part of it that allows external access to your systems by the criminals. And, of course, malware can be anything from just annoying, malicious, can get in there as well. So I'll talk on some things of personal experience. I'm not endorsing these companies. I don't get any kickback from them. It's personal experience, not necessarily the thought of the police department or the city of Port St. Lucie. I'm telling you from what I know. WebRoot is a company that I've used. It used to be called Privix, P-R-E-V-X, but now it's called WebRoot, their parent company. But there are others out there. I think PCmatic, everyone's been seeing the commercials about PCmatic, about 100%, stops 100%. All right, so I use WebRoot, and it's like antivirus, on steroids, okay? And I feel very secure with that. Certainly you could have an antivirus and WebRoot or PCmatic, which I haven't experienced yet, but they sound impressive, or some similar company like that, to protect your system from being hacked. And if, for example, CryptoLocker, has anyone heard of that? All right, so your computer's compromised and they encrypt all your personal data, or in this case, your business data, and they hold you hostage. And they say there's a countdown, 24 hours. You're going to pay them in Bitcoin. All right, so you're going to buy Bitcoin online. They're going to give you instructions on how. If you fail to pay them and the clock runs out, your stuff remains encrypted. You will never, ever, 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 ever get it unencrypted again. If you don't know the password, and every Windows-based software has the encryption part of it, you could turn that on yourself if you wanted to encrypt something. Well, the criminals turn that on, and they encrypt all your personal data, usually everything under My Documents and anything else that they target. And government agencies, health care facilities, big companies, big name companies have all paid these people because they weren't properly prepared with the backup, or it was just, oh no, what are we going to do, caught unawares, and their stuff is encrypted. Well, if the system goes down, the hospital says all our patients and all these machines and stuff could fail and people could die, so we're going to pay up. Or the government agency says, holy smokes, we don't have our stuff backed up with all these, all these people's records, and so we better pay. So they paid. They don't make a big deal out of it. They don't tell you they paid, but they did, unless they want to wipe their entire systems clean and restore from the latest backup, and who knows how long ago that was. So as a business person, you should be backing up your data. But back to CryptoLocker. WebRoot, for the longest time, was saying, and I guess PCmatic can do it as well, that if it's in place, if it's installed on your computer system, before they attempt to do the CryptoLocker, it will stop it in its tracks and reverse back to normal. But if you don't already have it in place, it can't help you once you have everything encrypted, you see? So you have to be prepared for a breach. You have to be prepared what kind of data is accessible, what kind of data is being shared. Do you have a firewall? Is it sufficient? Do you have Wi-Fi? Is it locked down properly, encrypted? What kind of passwords are you using? You need a professional to set these stuff up. You don't call Billy down the street because he knows a little bit more about computers than you to set up the Wi-Fi at your business because you want to compete against Dunkin' Donuts or Barnes & Noble and have your customers use free Wi-Fi to play. So that'll draw them in. But if you don't set it up right and it's on the same IP sequence as your point of sale systems, then you can sit across the street and what's called a sniffer, and basically everything that comes and goes from your connection, from your doorway, can be seen and a copy of it retained by the criminals. Now, the gentleman in the back talked about his laptop and being able to spoof or pretend to be the access point that your phone or device is used to connecting to. So you go to Marriott Hotel and it says free Marriott, conference room, Wi-Fi, and you log on. I've seen demonstrations. It's a phone that will mimic that SSID, that access point name that your device has already been authorized by you to connect to, bump you off that, which your device immediately tries, constantly trying to connect. In fact, right now, how many of you have your Wi-Fi turned on? Wi-Fi turned on, right? So every place that you've ever connected to, you're authorized connected to, SSID, that unique name or whatever it is listed on that phone. And it's constantly looking for those where it's familiar. Where is it at? Because as soon as it sees it, it wants to connect to it. So I've seen it bump you off the connection. You reconnect right back on the Marriott conference room Wi-Fi, but it's not. It's his phone. And that phone is acting as access point, and it's now bumped you, and now it sees your phone. It knows what your operating system is, sees every SSID, every connection you've ever, access point you've connected to. It can learn a lot about you, right? FBI surveillance van, Port St. Lucie Police Department, Wackenhut, here's Kellogg Corporation, whatever. They can learn about you. They also know what kind of software your phone is running, and so they can then do special software attacks on your phone because you're connected to them. Your Wi-Fi should be off until you're ready to use it. It's going to save your battery, and it's not constantly going to be trying to connect to everything out there that it recognizes. Okay? Is it properly set up at your business? If you're doing Wi-Fi, do you need to have it on the... If you're going to set up a network and you're going to have a point-of-sale system and free wireless for your customers, they should be on separate IP networks. It should be separated. It shouldn't be on the same band. And it needs to be set up properly. It needs to be encrypted. And do you have to have Wi-Fi for personal stuff for your employees and business, emails and stuff like that available when you've already got the guest one going that's on a whole separate network, IP address than your point-of-sale system? Personally, I don't think you should have anything personal going on with your point-of-sale system network. In fact, I think you should have a separate router, separate network for your point-of-sale system. No emails on there, no personal stuff, strictly point-of-sale communication with a firewall, and then have your other network separated for all your personal stuff and your business stuff. Also, know your customers. When they want to sign up as a vendor or do business with you, you have to be skeptical about anything that involves money. Them giving you money, you giving them money, you should have your awareness heightened right there, because what's the bottom line? What does the criminals want? Money. What do business owners want? Money. So you say, all right, great, big customer, this fell in my lap, didn't expect this, what a wonderful boon, this is really going to help the business. Boy, they want to give me a $1.2 million project. Wonderful. You have to be skeptical. Why you? Then you got to look for those key things about urgency, about, listen to your gut. Well, if you want it to be true so badly, you're not going to listen to your gut. That's where most victims fall for crimes, because it takes a willing partner, and you want to believe it. You want to believe it so badly that you ignore the gut, right? Something too good to be true usually is. So you have to be skeptical. You have to somehow independently verify what's going on. And not by what they give you. Because if they give you an email, they give you a link, they give you a phone number, they give you a fax, that's all potentially compromised if they are, in fact, criminal masquerading as a customer or a vendor or whoever. So you have to go back to your records or independently look up their information and contact them. Don't use what they gave you. And don't give up any information when they, you hear all the time, if somebody calls you, don't give your personal information over the phone. Same thing with the business. I've received calls at the police department about, oh, yeah, I need you to walk over to the copier machine. We need blah, blah, blah. Who's this? Oh, we're your vendor, blah, 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 for this. And they weren't, all right? But it was going to lead to a sales or something or another. They're going to get their foothold in there with the police department for sales, for their toner, for whatever. They play games. Well, the criminals, that's all they do for a living. All day. They can take a million chances and fail, and you only have to fail once to lose, okay? So you have to be ready. You have to have your data backed up. You have to make sure it's separated, preferably like on a thumb drive or something removed from the system that's not constantly on the system. A backup of those important data to be prepared to restore. And can I live with every week a week's worth of lost data? Or maybe I can only live with 2 days worth of lost data, so you better back up every 2 days. Separate drives. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Things fail. That thumb drive gets demagnetized, or it fails, or it gets wet, or whatever the case is, now you've lost all your backup data. So redundancy, but secure. They have secure thumb drives. They have secure drives that everything on there. You got to put in a password to access that. That's important. You can have your business data on an otherwise clean laptop or tablet, and you plug in your encrypted USB drive, and there's your business data, your presentations, and whatever your spreadsheets, and use it off of that, save it onto that, and that computer gets stolen or lost or left behind or whatever, you're not losing, you haven't exposed all your data out there. That's a possibility. Also, again, communicating at work with people that you think you know. You have to be skeptical about any time there's money. You heard about the ploys with the emails from the bosses. Send a wire. That's happening a lot. All right? You think you know who's contacting you. Stop. If it's a rush job, slow down. Do just the opposite of what they're wanting you to do. You should have a second verification on anything having to do with ACH transfers, money transfers, anything like that. Basically, anything where you're sending out money, you should have a second form of verification. Unless you know who you're dealing with and it's consistent with what you've had in the past and it's not a big dollar amount where you couldn't afford not to lose it if it was a fraud, I get that. Okay, oh, it's way to get, he's emailed me about that invoice, I knew he did the work, that's right, consistent with what it was supposed to be. It's probably weighed. Okay, fine, send off the payment. But if it's unusual, if it's a rush job, if it's someone from in the company that wants you to do something, independently, don't email them back the same way they contacted you, or call them, or verify if they called you on the phone and you think you know who you're dealing with. Independently, contact them and say, I just wanted to verify again. You want me to send that? All right? If they say, oh, well, of course, I just got off the phone, they say, fine. It's just there's so much fraud going on, I just want to make sure, protecting the bottom line, protecting the company. Can't fault you for that. But you'd have a second form of verification before you send out money. Tons of money being sent out from attorneys and from title companies, escrow accounts, banks. They're getting fooled, okay? So they're out there, it's going to happen, they're going to attempt to do it to you. Also with links. You get an email and something doesn't seem right. Well, this is from the IT department. You need to verify your account right now or we're going to shut you down. Well, that's an urgency thing, right? Independently call your IT person and say, what's up with this email? Well, what are you talking about? Well, what do you mean? That's what you're going to hear. We get them at the police department too, trying to compromise us. They're trying to compromise everybody. They want to get into wherever they can. Maybe they're your value right now, maybe you'll be a value in the future. So they want to compromise your systems and your computers. Also, let me see, everything's internet. If you got the point of sale systems, make sure that you buy the equipment from the vendor. Don't buy on the cheap from somebody. Oh, it's used from another business, because they could be compromised. They could already have skimming devices placed inside. Also, your point of sale system is a computer, right? So you have multiple registers, multiple terminals, perhaps, depending on your business, and they all go to a central computer server that then everything goes through and talks for verification on a third-party verification company like Access Data or whatever, and then, or First Data, I mean, and then they verify, okay, that's good, and process that transaction. So you have a server, computer for all your point-of-sale systems, and your terminals themselves, they need to be secured. Why? Well, okay, let's take Saks Fifth Avenue down in Aventura Mall. They had 9 skimming devices in the store that they removed. They're in the back of the terminals because they're exposed to the public. The public potential enemy. You don't know who you're dealing with. And the criminals go and they unplug and plug it in, a USB, in line. You don't pay any attention because you're not, and it's exposed out there in the floors where sometimes there's not anybody right there at the register because they're out helping other people. And now every transaction from that terminal is being recorded. All right? And many of them nowadays will have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth so they can remotely be accessed, or they'll phone home basically over the internet connection and dump all the information. They'll encrypt it and dump all the information to the criminals so they have all these account information from all your customers, which is going to undermine confidence in your brand name, right? So they'll do that all the time. But your point-of-sale system, here's an example. Gas pumps. Skimmers are out of control at gas pumps. All right? It takes about 10 seconds to put them inside. Now, you can go ahead and put them in all the pumps if you want to and put them Wi-Fi, and you don't have to even pull them back out. You can dump all the data from 1,000 feet away on your tablet whenever you want. Or you can go inside the store and pay, and it's like, oh, that's secure, right? Well, what do you find when you go to a store? Where's the bathroom? There. Where's the office? There. Is the office open? You bet. Anybody in there? Nope. And there's the computer on the ground, the point-of-sale server, all dusty. Slide that back. Instead of going left to the bathroom, they go right. In the old days, they used to steal checks from the office. Now they go and put the skimming device in the back of the PC. Now every terminal, every pump inside the store, everything goes through that. And it's open. It's encrypted at the machine with your card if you use the chip, but then it's not being encrypted and sent for third-party verification of that card to be authorized for that purchase. It's open air. So you have to secure these things. You have to secure that server. You have to make sure it's physically secured as well as digitally secured from the internet and also internally. Your cleaning crew, a rogue employee, now we're going to start going internal. All right? To do a crime, you've got to, to steal, you got 3 things you need. You have to have a need for that money to take that risk. And then you have to have an opportunity. And there are opportunities around us all the time, but we ignore them because we don't have the need. We don't have the need to burn that bridge with this employer that treats us right. We don't have the need to steal this money that may end up putting us in prison. All right? Opportunities around us all the time where we slip up, where we put too much power in an individual, too much control in one person with no checks and balances, no oversight, no second-party verification. And I'll give you some examples in a moment. And then the third thing you need is rationalization or justification. Well, I needed it, or I'm just borrowing it and I'm going to pay it back. I'm just trying to get through this unforeseen situation that happened and I'm embarrassed about and I don't want to share it. And they're kind people. I know they'd let me if I asked them, but I don't want to ask because it's too embarrassing. So I'm just going to borrow a little bit just to get me by. And they borrow a little bit, and they borrow a little bit, and it gets easier every time. All right? They've crossed that barrier. It's no longer that fence. It's now just a little hurdle, and it gets smaller every time. Well, I'll just go back. And what happens if the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer? All your problems look like nails. So every time you got a financial problem, rather than try to figure it out yourself, you go back to the quick solution source. Well, I'll just borrow a little bit more to take care of that. We all have problems. We all got situations. We got to work it out. We got to maybe call and say, hey, I need an extension. We do this. Well, no, you don't have to do any of that if I got a free source of money because the boss doesn't pay attention to what's going on. All right? Well-known medical facility, person in charge of insurance billing, diverting checks. It's supposed to be a place to the account of the patients. They do a co-payment and then they get the insurance check gets sent to the facility. And it's going into sub-accounts created over here, not being credited to the patients, and tens of thousands of dollars, in which then they siphon off of. Okay, a well-known plastic surgeon, employee, front desk person, receiving cash payments. If you're dealing in cash, we'll talk about some security things you need to do, but cash. So a patient pays cash for the co-payment. The employee, having anticipated this, has account number for a credit card from another patient that had visited several months earlier. So you don't keep that kind of stuff on a sticky pad unless you're planning to do something. So you charge that amount on that credit card, manually enter, key enter. Because that's all you need is account number. You don't need a physical card. So that cash from this patient goes in my pocket because I need the cash. I have a need. I have the opportunity. I'm going to rationalize it. I'm going to just pay it back. And then a couple days later, as soon as the end of that week, because they know the procedures of when everything is balanced out, right, for the activities, they go ahead and manually credit back that other customer's credit card so it doesn't show up on their bill as a charge. And nobody's paying attention because that week everything balanced out. And we're not looking back. Now we're in the new week. Security of your systems and your employees. What kind of data do you have, and what type of restrictions do you have for the personnel that can access those systems? Are they able to do everything like you, or are they restricted to just what they need? A very well-known dermatology company with an employee that's not even has any certifications or any type of medical training whatsoever, employee, has access to all the computers, any of the computers of a particular facility. All the computers are the same, and you can access, anyone, any employee, access all the customer records for all the patients, current and past, from all the facility locations, like 26, 28, throughout the state of Florida. And this is not even a medical employee. They don't need to have that kind of access, right? So 29 identity theft victims later, from the information used, she's now in prison. But the thing is that why do you need that kind of access for a low-level employee restricted thing? A well-known brand business, cash business, gave an employee a company debit card for emergencies only. But it's a cash business, but okay, debit card for emergency purposes. While the owner was out doing other things and leaving this trusted friend of the family, 8, 9 years, in charge. So they make a bunch of money, and they're supposed to make the deposit at the bank. Well, guess what? Deposits weren't going to the bank. And the accountant was not a trained CPA or a financial trained to following those practices that you're supposed to follow when you're in charge of finances. It was just someone who did basic bookkeeping. Every couple weeks, come in and do a little bit. And there was no restrictions for this employee who was in charge of everything while the boss is away, often, to bring back deposit slips, the receipts for the deposits. So there was no checks and balances, the verification of X amount of money from the receipts came in that day, X amount of money was deposited in the bank on this day, and they go together in the file, and this part-time accountant person can then see how much we brought in, how much was deposited, how much is in the bank account, what's being spent. The only way that this person, over $100,000 stolen in a year. How do you miss that? Because you're not paying attention. $100,000, more than $100,000 stolen. And the only reason that the employee or the owner caught onto this was the employee was now going to use the debit card for emergencies only for a couple ATM cash withdrawals because he needed even more money because we weren't able to steal enough from the deposits, needed more money. Drugs. There was the need. I've never found anyone more motivated than a drug addict. I mean, when they're paying a $2,000 to $3,000 a day habit every day, 7 days a week, that's motivation. So she caught on, and now, of course, we got to look back and said, oh, well, I should have made $260,000 with this business, and in fact, I only had 160 or 150 something thousand deposited. I'm missing 100,000. Oh. Another, not a well-known business, but big business, a couple partners. What I found with partners is nobody's really in charge, it seems like, on the problems, the ones that I've had, cases. Everybody's a partner, but nobody's really paying attention. They have an employee who's the bookkeeper, in charge of the money, has a debit card for the company for emergency purchases, pretty much handling the day-to-day stuff with the accounting. has a sickly a child, one of those situations where it's always going to have issues. Didn't provide medical to the employees, and there was the need. And single mom, deadbeat father, not contributing to the family whatsoever. They even allowed her to leave early to go take care of her kids when they got out of school because of the sickly kid and do remote bookkeeping from home, which is up in Vero. So, 2.5-year period, $130,000 just in ATM cash withdrawals. 258 ATM cash withdrawals, 2.5-year period. Not counting about another $60,000 in questionable lunches and purchases from Amazon and things like that were, I didn't bother with that. It was enough. It was first-degree felony and could have gotten life in prison. And it's sad because she was doing it because she's paying for medical for herself and her kid. It's sad, but there was the need. There was the opportunity. And they rationalized it. You see? So, do your employees have access? Oh, employee of 8-9 years, supposed to be a stellar employee. 3 partners, well-known business, cash business. This employee was doing the day-to-day operations while the 3 partners are out spending money and doing their thing. Day-to-day operations, cash business. She was in charge of her own hours as far as how many hours she worked and paying herself from the cash for her hours. And there also was company debit cards there for one of the partners that was left there for emergencies because I guess the partner didn't want it with him, so he leaves it there in a file cabinet. It's not secure. Well, I'm sure there was a lot of money missing up to that point, even though they thought it was stellar because it's a cash business and she was in charge of everything. But it was pretty obvious when she paid for a champagne wedding at the Hard Rock Hotel for over $50,000 on the company debit card and the partner's name because she deserved it. She's a princess. All right? And why? Because you weren't protecting the money. There was no checks and balances. All right? I've had doctors' offices where the bookkeeper or the accountant is stealing. The doctors are working hard. They're doing what they know is making money. Patients are coming in. They know they got a lot of money. Then they go to buy something, and all of a sudden the money ain't there. Oh, why? Because all trust was placed in this one individual, and they're cooking the books. A well-known, very well-known AC company, a well-known roofing company, same things. Cooking the books. They're saying, okay, taking this money, diverting this money, various ways, and then they had too much control. Basically, they're dealing with the vendors and they're bringing in money and they're putting it in places on the spreadsheet to basically hide it or confuse it to make it look like it went somewhere else. Happens. I see it happen a lot. And those are just the ones that we catch on. And sometimes they're 1, 2, 3 years down the line. How can that be? Because bosses are not had independent auditors come in to check the books. Somebody independent. Don't work for you. I know that costs money. But maybe going to save you money, right? It's like insurance. Have somebody come in that follows accounting practices, that's got a certification or got their own company or bonded or whatever, and they come in and they review your books once a year. Or maybe a spot check. Maybe you as a boss do a spot check to make sure your employees are doing what they're supposed to do and not doing what they're not supposed to do. Don't do a routine. Well-known convalescence center got a cash box for incidentals that the money belongs to the patients, elderly patients, in case they need something or whatever. And they had and they had 2 employees in charge. And every month, at the first of the month, these 2 employees would get together and they count out the money and they'd make sure exactly what the accounting was. Right? Everything's good. Well, something didn't seem right this one month, and so 3 days into the month or 4 days into the month, they decided to do a spot redo. And guess what? $860 were missing. 3 days after they just got done making sure everything was right. Why? Because one of the 2 employees, because there was no restrictions on this, they had access to the safe and everybody knew the password and everything, or the combination. And she's just floating alone to the next month. She'd been doing that for months and months and months to pay off bills and the things that she needed. She had a need. She had an opportunity. She rationalized it. She was going to pay it back, and she did every month. She'd get her paycheck, and she'd put it back in before the next audit because she knew the routine. Except, she didn't have time to get it back in there because they did a spot check on it because something just didn't seem right. So, I like Reagan a lot, Ronald Reagan. He said, trust, but verify, okay? Employees say, what's the matter? You don't trust me? Absolutely, I trust you. When I see that you're doing what you're supposed to do, when I see you're not doing what you're not supposed to do, I absolutely trust you. But that doesn't mean blind trust. So we're dealing with money. We're talking on the livelihood of your fellow employees, of the company, of the brand. And that's just the way it is. Don't take it personal. But if they think that you're going to check on them at a moment's notice, more than likely in the back of their head they're going to say, I have a need, I have an opportunity, is it worth the risk? Because I'm probably going to get caught before I can really make it meaningful for me. All right, how many of you have company trucks that the employees take home? How many side jobs are they doing under your company name, your liability, your employee, unauthorized, keep pocketing that money themselves, not going into business with your truck, with your tools? It happens. Plumbers, roofers, air conditioner repair people, Geek Squad, whatever. All right? So, do you know where your employee's going with that equipment? What they're doing when they shouldn't be on the weekends, if you let them take it home as a perk, you know? So they can get right to work, right to the customer's place and first thing Monday morning so they don't have to come to the office first and change out and get in the truck. Well, if you're taking a risk, you should have a GPS tracker. They're cheap enough. You don't even have to have the real-time monitoring. You can have the ones you slap on or plug in and then download it later. Spot check. How fast are they going? Are they, you know, where did they go? And they'll tell you speed, direction, braking, you know, everything. Are they driving like maniacs? Are they doing work on the side they shouldn't be doing? I miss you too. So, you know, trust but verify, okay? Be aware. Situational awareness. Make sure that your important things are locked down, that are protected. Always have an independent person verify things. Second verification. Have spot checks to make sure procedures are being done. Make sure your employees understand the procedures. Have them put it in writing, have them sign it so they understand it. So later when I have to have them arrested because they took advantage of you, there's not any doubt. Oh, I didn't know I couldn't do that. All right? Well, they never told me I couldn't. Well, they gave me the card. I just used it for some. No. Spell it out. Have them sign it so they understand. They unplug the cameras. They use the company card without permission. They do this, they do that, whatever. It's fireable offense. First time. There's so much more to pass on, but I hope I've helped in some small way. So thank you.
With most organizations, since we're in a business environment, there are three key factors, and I add a fourth one that deals with cybersecurity of every organization. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with processes, which deal with workflow, you're dealing with policies, which deal with policies and procedures, and for a lot of small businesses, of course, this is a tough thing to implement in your organizations because it takes a lot of time and effort, and it also involves a lot of training of your employees, which is another key factor of a lot of organizations out there should institute training of their employees and making them aware of what's called a CETA program, which is called Security Education, Training, and Awareness for all of their employees within any organization. The last part, besides the three Ps, which is people, processes, and policies and procedures, is the technology, which is what a lot of the focus is on today. And I will touch on that a little bit in regards to earlier BB&T had a presentation on credit cards and financial transactions, and Wade touched on it as well. And a lot of things now, as far as we hear about skimmers, and that deals with two factors of security. In every situation, there's physical security, which is protecting things from a physical sense, but there's also logical security, which deals with the information online in a logical sense in electronic form. And both of those two components have both internal and external elements to it. And as an example, in most organizations, everyone thinks, oh, the cybersecurity threat's always going to come from the outside. But in fact, through a lot of organizations such as Forrester or other industry standard organizations, the proof is in the statistics that most of the cybersecurity threats come from 70% as internal actors and 30% in general from external sources. So everybody hears on the news every day, Target's been breached, this entity's been breached. But most of the times it's from an internal source, such as we talked about earlier, dealing with human factors, which is our people, our employees. It has to do with two things, primarily because they're not trained and aware, but then also you have the malicious actors involved. So with that, those are the things that we all face challenges with within any organization. And real quick, some solutions, since I have a limited amount of time, is dealing with policies and procedures. You want to look up online what's called a business continuity plan, which is a process that will help you ensure your organization will survive from any type of cyber threat. You want to also look up what's called a disaster recovery plan, which deals with things that Detective Wade talked about earlier, which is backup and recovery. So in essence, when I lose my data or if my data is compromised due to a ransomware attack, how can I restore it without having to pay these cyber threat actors out in the real world and still retrieve my data within my own ability and get my business back online as soon as possible? And the other one is a incident response plan. And that deals with what we talked about today, which is when you're dealing with cyber threats, whether physical or logical in nature, there's all these different components. And you want to put a plan in place that has a series of policies and procedures that any employee can pick up at any time and say, I need to do step 1, step 2, step 3. And also develop checklists to say, well, I made sure I covered this, I made sure I covered that. Because in the midst of a recovery from a cyber threat, it's a period of high emotion, a lot of energy and resources are brought to bear on a type of situation, whether it's from external sources, if you reached out to, let's say, local law enforcement, if there's criminal elements to the cyber breach, or if there's civil elements to the cyber breach, there's also civilian agencies to reach out to for assistance. If you get to that level where you're having to deal with that, it's a very pressured time, and you want to make sure that checklist helps you make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's to make sure that you not only recover your business, because the operation of your business is key to continue generating an income, but that you do it in a way that you can't be breached again from the same flaw that caused you to be breached in the first place. So to drill down real quick, and not to scare everybody, but research came out from a university in the UK in December of last year, which all credit cards of everybody sitting in this room can be breached within roughly 6 seconds. The reason why that is it's not so much because if your credit card is skimmed from a skimmer device or if your credit card is picked up from a cell phone, which uses what we call NFC, near field communications, where they can kind of bump into you and pick up your credit card information via a mobile device by getting close to you, because those cards emit a bit of a signal that can be picked up by your cell phones, and then that information is obtained. Those are all physical and or logical threats to concern. But the big thing is that the reason why the current threat exists for all of us in this room, for all the credit cards that we have and any type of financial transactions we process, is because the botnets that are used pull all of the e-commerce sites simultaneously. So the big three are American Express, Visa, and MasterCard. Visa is the current one right now that's most susceptible to this threat. But MasterCard has implemented some measures on a global scale to help detect and help prevent, as well as American Express. But unfortunately, even though Visa has been reached out to with this research that's been uncovered, they haven't implemented enough solutions in place at a global scale to help mitigate the threat. But what happens is the botnets go out, and your credit card has 16-digit numbers, so it's MasterCard or Visa usually starts with a 5 or a 4. Your American Express card has 15 numbers, and it starts with a 3. The first roughly 10 to 12 numbers in that credit card are easily obtainable because they either follow a certain sequence that's relatively guessable, and so your last 3 or 4 digits in that card then are what, let's say you get in your credit card statement, it shows, oh, you're 1767. The last digit is based on what's called a long algorithm, which in essence determines that last number based on the prefix of the first 14 numbers or 15 numbers before that number to generate the last number. So that number is guessable, and in turn, all you have left is 3 guesses. And that's what happens is the botnets go out and they pull all the commerce sites with all these false numbers, including your CCV number, which is your security code number on the back of the card, which is 3-digit for Visa and American Express, and it's your 4-digit number on the front of the American Express card, along with your expiration date. So if you think about it, your expiration date's 4 digits, which is only 10,000 combinations. Your 3-digit CCV is 3 numbers, which is 999 combinations, or in essence 1,000 guesses. And if you think about it, the botnets that are used will pull, if you go to Walmart.com, Target.com, they'll pull all these sites simultaneously with all this fake information. And they just continually pound it with 16 digits, and here's your 4-digit guess, and your 3-digit guess. In time, it doesn't take much time. That's why I said in the very beginning, when I was mentioning this, it only takes about 6 seconds when you pull all these sites and start to pull in all this information of what's considered big data, and you pull it into a spreadsheet, they will easily surmise those credit card numbers within a relatively brief period of time, because the entire e-commerce system is designed to be open and it's designed to be responsive, so that, like, if you use your username and password and you log in after 5 times, your account becomes disabled, right? But with the credit card attempts to continually use false cards, those e-commerce sites might allow 50 times, 100 times, or unlimited attempts to try to guess a correct combination of your 16-digit number or 15-digit number, your CCV number, and your expiration date. It's almost like they have an unlimited opportunity to continue try, but they do it simultaneously on a global scale with super fast computer systems that just turn these numbers over and over and over and over, and all of a sudden click, got one, click, got one, click, got one. So eventually they get all this feedback, and eventually they will either sell it on the black market for $1 a piece, which is basically what it's worth in the bad side of the realm of what we do. And so that information on all of us is easily compromisable. And so some of the things that you can do to protect yourselves is, from a physical sense, back to physical security. If you does everybody know what a Faraday cage is by chance? It's like you've seen it in some of the movies where there's computer systems encapsulated in a wire mesh environment, and it helps prevent signals from going in and out of that environment to be picked up. The same thing you can in wallets, and especially for the ladies, if you go into an airport, they have them for sale. These little purses or wallets that have like an aluminum wrapper around it that helps protect your credit cards if you do carry them on you. So that, back to what I said in the very beginning, if someone walks up with a mobile device with NFC enabled and tries to pick up your information from the card, it'll prevent it, because that little bit of aluminum strip helps protect that, exactly. So that's a physical method of protection that you can use as an example that'll help prevent people picking up things wirelessly. But they have to get close to you to do it, very close, just so you know. But it is possible, so that's as an example of physical protection. Logical protections are to get into the habit of always, the best solution, whether you're business or personal, is to always monitor your credit card statements. Always really scrutinize them for every charge that there is. Because at the end of the day, you are your own best, like how they say in health, you're your own best doctor. It's the same thing with cybersecurity as an organization or as a person. You're your own best solution in helping mitigate it, because you can purchase LifeLock, you can purchase the triple card credit bureau stuff, and all that's helpful. Back to what we were saying earlier, that you want these layers of security in what we do. We want to add layers. And we talked about earlier about what was that? Pop money and things like that, and coordinating with your bank to reconcile, to make sure that when transactions go through that they're vetted. You do want to add all those layers of security to make it harder, so that you're not as easy of a target the next person, so they might move on. Not that you want the next person to be compromised, but if you implement these things in your organization and or in your personal lives to make it a little bit harder for them to compromise you versus the next person who will leave you alone and move on to the next one. It's kind of like that old concept: if one house on the block has a burglar alarm and one doesn't, who's the burglar going to go after? The one without the alarm, right? So that's back to what I said in the very beginning. You want to raise your employees' awareness. You want to train them and yourselves, constantly be aware of the threats out there, because even beyond what we can do to control, there's just ways, like I mentioned, such as using these botnets to compromise your credit cards, that they don't have to have access to your credit card, they don't have to know anything about you, they don't have to pull all social media sites for your personal information, they can just guess, just brute force guess. And until we change our entire e-commerce system to help mitigate that, which like I mentioned, MasterCard has put in some global initiatives to help detect and prevent that, and we're trying to get some of the professionals in our industry are working with them to improve those detection and prevention methods and work with customers. It's the concept of cybersecurity is our shared responsibility. So it's from the layperson, which is us everyday people that use the services from the financial institutions, all the way up to the institutions themselves and government. Everybody working together as partners to try to mitigate it, because it's really a big problem in our world today. So I know I'm out of time, so I had to wrap it up. But thank you.